I'm Morgan Reynolds, 32, and I've always prided myself on being the responsible one. My marketing career has me traveling often, but home is my sanctuary, at least it was. When I returned from Chicago 2 days early, I never expected to find my front door unlocked, walls half demolished, and furniture covered in plastic. The worst part? I could hear my younger sister Rachel's voice, confidently directing someone in my living room. The home I'd worked so hard for was being gutted without my knowledge or consent. My shock quickly morphed into something darker. Before I tell you how I confronted my sister who was demolishing my living room without permission, make sure to hit like and subscribe if you've ever had a family member cross your boundaries. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. I've been the responsible one for as long as I can remember. Growing up in a small town outside of Boston, I was the kind of kid who finished homework before dinner and saved birthday money instead of spending it. Rachel, on the other hand, was the free spirit, talented, creative, and completely unconcerned with consequences or planning ahead. Our dynamic was set in stone when our parents divorced. I was 15 and Rachel was 12 when our father announced he'd fallen in love with his administrative assistant and was moving to Florida. Mom fell apart completely, spending most days in her bedroom with the curtains drawn. Someone had to keep our household functioning, and that someone became me. I learned to pay bills, cook meals, and attend parent-teacher conferences for Rachel. While friends were going to football games and school dances, I was checking my sister's homework and making sure we had enough groceries to last the week. Don't get me wrong, I love Rachel deeply, but our relationship has always been more parental than sisterly. College was my escape plan. I earned a partial scholarship to UMass, but still worked 2 part-time jobs to cover the rest of tuition and send money home. Marketing captured my interest because it combined creativity with strategy. I could use both sides of my brain while building a stable career path with growth potential. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at Thompson & Associates, a mid-sized marketing firm in Boston. The hours were brutal, but I thrived on the challenge. Within 5 years, I moved from assistant to account manager to senior manager handling several major clients. 3 years ago, at 29, I achieved what felt like an impossible dream. I bought a house. Not a fancy place, a modest 1,950 seconds bungalow with good bones in a quiet neighborhood. The 2-bedroom, 1.5-bath home needed updates but was structurally sound. The previous owners had maintained it well, with original hardwood floors and charming built-ins. That house represented everything I'd worked for. Every overtime hour, every missed vacation, every dollar saved, it all culminated in those keys being placed in my hand at closing. I moved in with just a bed, a couch, and a sense of accomplishment that made me cry when I was finally alone that first night. Over the next 3 years, I furnished my home carefully, saving for quality pieces, rather than filling it with disposable items. The living room featured a comfortable gray sectional I'd splurged on, paired with oak side tables found at estate sales. My kitchen remained mostly original with its vintage cabinets painted a soft white and new quartz countertops I'd saved 6 months for. I had plans for renovations, of course. I kept a notebook filled with magazine clippings, paint swatches, and careful budgets for each project. The bathroom was first on my list. The baby blue tile had seen better days. I'd been getting quotes from contractors and was about halfway to my savings goal. Throughout these years, Rachel bounced between creative jobs, graphic design, photography, interior staging, never sticking with anything long enough to build a career. Her talent was undeniable, but her follow-through was non-existent. She'd start projects with enormous enthusiasm, only to abandon them when something more interesting came along. Our relationship had been strained during my late 20s. Rachel resented what she called my boring lifestyle and judgmental attitude about her choices. I worried about her financial instability and tendency to rely on boyfriends for support. We'd go weeks without speaking, then reconnect as if nothing had happened. We'd begun to repair things in recent months after Rachel moved in with Daniel Hughes, a software developer who seemed to provide some stability. For the first time, she stayed in one apartment for more than 6 months and talked about building a life with someone. Then came the breakup. Rachel showed up at my door 3 weeks ago. Mascara streaked down her face, asking if she could stay just for a few days until she figured things out. Despite my reservations, I cleared out my home office divided by guest room and welcomed her in. The timing wasn't ideal. I was preparing for a major presentation to Landing Gear, an athletic apparel company that could potentially double our agency's revenue. My boss, Robert Thompson, had entrusted me with the pitch because of my track record with retail clients. For 2 weeks, I worked late every night, barely seeing Rachel except when I'd come home to find dishes in the sink and her belongings gradually spreading throughout my carefully organized home. We had a brief argument when I found her using my expensive face creams, but mostly kept the peace by avoiding each other. The Chicago trip was scheduled for 4 days. I flew out on Monday, made the presentation on Tuesday, and expected meetings through Thursday. The pitch went better than anyone anticipated. Landing Gear's CMO said it was the most comprehensive proposal they'd seen and wanted to move forward immediately. Robert was ecstatic. "Morgan, you just landed us the biggest account of the year. The team can handle the follow-up meetings. Take the rest of the week off, you've earned it." I caught an early flight Wednesday morning, excited for 2 unexpected days to myself. Maybe I'd finally get started on repainting my bedroom, or just enjoy the quiet of my home without work pressure for the first time in months. The Uber dropped me off around 2 p.m. I noticed a white panel van in my driveway, but assumed it belonged to one of the neighbors. When I reached my front steps, I heard music playing inside something, with a heavy bass that wasn't my style at all. Using my key, I opened the door to a scene that stopped me cold. The wall separating my living room from the dining room was half gone, with exposed beams and electrical wires hanging out. Plastic sheeting covered my furniture, which had been pushed to the center of the room. A fine layer of drywall dust coated everything, and the hardwood floors I loved were scratched from what looked like dragged furniture. Then I heard Rachel's voice coming from the kitchen. "No, no, Jason, the blue tile is for the bathroom. The kitchen gets the white subway tile with gray grout." I stood frozen in my own foyer, suitcase still in hand, unable to process what I was seeing. "Rachel?" My voice came out strangled and high. I barely recognized it as my own. The music suddenly stopped. Footsteps approached from the kitchen, and Rachel appeared in what used to be the doorway, but was now a gaping hole. She was wearing overalls splattered with paint, her dark hair piled in a messy bun. Her expression shifted from surprise to excitement. "Morgan! Oh my God, you're back early!" She bounded toward me like an excited puppy, seemingly oblivious to my shock. "This is perfect timing. Now you can help decide about the kitchen backsplash." I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up, and I felt lightheaded as I surveyed the destruction of my home. "Hey, you okay?" Rachel frowned, finally noticing my expression. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "What have you done?" I managed to push each word out separately. A man appeared behind Rachel, tall with a tool belt slung low on his hips. He had the decency to look uncomfortable as he assessed my reaction. "Morgan, this is Jason Wilson. He's an amazing contractor I know from when I worked at that design studio last year." Rachel gestured toward him casually. "Jason, this is my sister Morgan, the homeowner." Jason gave a weak wave. "Nice to meet you. Your sister has some great vision for this place." "Vision?" I finally found my voice, and it was trembling with rage. "Rachel, you've demolished my house. Without asking me, without permission." Rachel rolled her eyes. "Don't be so dramatic. We haven't demolished anything. We're opening up the floor plan to create better flow. This place was so closed off and compartmentalized, just like your life." She laughed at her own joke. I set my suitcase down carefully, afraid that if I moved too quickly, I might actually lunge at my sister. "You had absolutely no right to do this." "It was going to be a surprise," Rachel insisted, her smile fading as she realized I wasn't sharing her enthusiasm. "I found your renovation notebook, saw all those boring, safe ideas, and knew you needed help making this place actually livable for someone under 60. You went through my things?" The violation kept getting worse. "I was looking for a phone charger in your office and found it in your desk. Once I saw how painfully conventional your plans were, I called Jason. She gestured again to the man who was now studying his work boots intently. And who authorized payment for all this? I asked, dreading the answer. Rachel's expression turned defensive. Well, I knew you'd been saving for renovations. You used my money? My voice had risen to a pitch I'd never heard from myself before. I found your emergency fund ledger in the same notebook, she explained as if this were perfectly reasonable. And since you're always saying how important home improvements are for resale value, I figured this qualified. Jason cleared his throat. Maybe I should step outside for a few minutes. No, Jason, stay. I want to know exactly what's been done and what it's going to cost to fix. I turned back to Rachel. How much of my money have you spent? Rachel crossed her arms. About 12,000 so far. But that includes all the materials for the kitchen and bathroom too. The room seemed to spin. $12,000, nearly all of my carefully saved renovation fund and emergency savings combined. We got an amazing deal on Italian marble for the bathroom, Rachel continued, misreading my silence as interest. And wait till you see the fixtures I picked for the kitchen. Brushed brass is totally in right now. Stop talking. I held up my hand. Just stop. You had no right, Rachel. This is my house, my money, my decision, and you've destroyed it without even asking me. Jason finally spoke up. Ma'am, I should mention that some of what we've done can't really be undone. That wall we opened up we've already removed enough that you'd need to completely reframe it to put it back. Did you at least get permits? I asked, knowing the answer already. The uncomfortable glance between Rachel and Jason told me everything. We were going to handle that once we saw how the initial demo went, Rachel said dismissively. Permits just slow everything down. They also keep the house from falling down around us. I snapped. Get out. Both of you, get out of my house right now. Jason nodded quickly. I'll grab my tools. Rachel's face crumpled into an expression I'd seen countless times, growing up the wounded look that usually made me back down and comfort her. Morgan, I was just trying to help. Your house was so boring and basic. I wanted to make it special for you since you work so hard. If you wanted to help, you could have asked. You could have respected my home and my boundaries. Instead, you violated both. My voice was ice cold. Take whatever belongs to you and get out. I need to assess the damage. Fine. Be ungrateful. Rachel's hurt transformed instantly to anger. I try to do something nice. Use my professional design experience to help your sad, colorless life. And this is the thanks I get. Professional experience? I laughed bitterly. You worked at a design studio for 3 months before quitting? That doesn't qualify you to tear down load-bearing walls. Jason reappeared with his toolbox. It's not actually a load-bearing wall, he mumbled, then seemed to regret speaking when both sisters glared at him. Just go, I said, suddenly exhausted. I can't deal with either of you right now. As they gathered their things, I stood in what remained of my living room, surveying the wreckage of my sanctuary. Dust covered everything. Electrical wires dangled dangerously from the ceiling. The beautiful built-in bookshelves I'd loved were partially demolished. The front door slammed as Rachel and Jason left. I sank onto my dust-covered couch and did something I hadn't allowed myself to do in years. I broke down completely and sobbed. When the tears finally stopped, I forced myself to take stock of the situation. The destruction was even worse than it had initially appeared. Beyond the half-removed wall between the living and dining rooms, my kitchen had been partially gutted. Cabinet doors lay stacked against walls, countertops had been removed, and boxes containing what must be the new fixtures Rachel mentioned sat unopened on the floor. I moved through each room methodically, taking photos with my phone to document the damage. The bathroom was next. The vintage blue tile I'd planned to replace eventually had been smashed and piled in the bathtub. The sink was disconnected, with exposed plumbing creating a small puddle on the floor. My hands shook as I called Amanda Mitchell, my best friend since college. She answered on the second ring. Hey, stranger, aren't you supposed to be in Chicago until Friday? Amanda, I need you. My voice cracked. Can you come over? It's an emergency. To her credit, Amanda didn't ask questions. I'm leaving work now. 20 minutes. While waiting, I continued my inventory. In my bedroom, boxes of new light fixtures and paint cans were stacked in the corner. A note from Rachel was taped to one. Thought a moody blue would help you sleep better than that boring beige. The doorbell rang, and I rushed to answer it, desperate for friendly support. Amanda stood there, concern etched on her face. Behind her was my neighbor, Mrs. Eleanor Bradley, a retired teacher who'd lived next door for 40 years. Morgan, dear, Mrs. Bradley began before I could speak. I've been worried sick. Those workers have been coming and going for 3 days now. Your sister assured me you had approved everything. But it didn't seem right without you here. I invited them both in, watching as their expressions shifted from concern to shock. Holy shit, Amanda whispered, taking in the destruction. Mrs. Bradley adjusted her glasses. I knew something wasn't right. Yesterday I asked that young man for permits, and he said they were in process. That's when I called the city inspector. You called an inspector? I felt both grateful and terrified. He's coming tomorrow morning, she confirmed. I've been through enough renovations to know when corners are being cut. Amanda had moved further into the house. Morgan, there's water leaking under your kitchen sink. The next hour was a blur of damage control. Amanda helped me shut off water valves, while Mrs. Bradley made calls to her handyman son-in-law for emergency advice. When things were temporarily stabilized, we sat at my dust-covered dining table drinking the wine Amanda had wisely brought along. So Rachel just decided to surprise you with a complete home renovation? Amanda asked incredulously. I nodded. Using my emergency fund and renovation savings about $12,000. And from what I can tell, much of it was spent on high-end materials that haven't even been installed yet. Can you get the money back? Mrs. Bradley asked. I don't know. She accessed my accounts without permission, which is technically theft. But she's your sister, Amanda finished, understanding the complicated dynamics. What about this contractor? Is he legitimate? I pulled up Jason Wilson's business card on my phone. A quick internet search revealed no website, no license information, and several concerning reviews mentioning unfinished work. Great, I muttered. She hired an unlicensed contractor who's apparently known for abandoning projects. My phone buzzed with a text from my boss. Landing Gear wants follow-up presentation Friday. Need you back in Chicago tomorrow. Booking flight now. The pressure was too much. Between the destruction of my home, the financial loss, and work demands, I felt myself starting to unravel again. Amanda must have seen it in my face. She took my phone and read the message. I'll call Robert, she decided. You can't fly back tomorrow. I have to, I argued weakly. This account is huge for the company. Your house has been vandalized and you've been robbed, Amanda stated firmly. Robert will understand. While she stepped outside to make the call, Mrs. Bradley patted my hand. Let's focus on making one room livable for tonight. Everything else can wait. We decided on the bedroom, which had escaped the worst of the demolition. For the next hour, we cleared construction materials, wiped down surfaces, and changed dust-covered bedding. Amanda returned, looking satisfied. Robert sends his sympathies and says the Chicago team can handle tomorrow's meeting. You're expected back Monday, not before. One small pressure point relieved, but the larger issues remained. We ordered takeout and continued assessing as we ate. Morgan, some of these modifications may actually be illegal without permits, Mrs. Bradley explained. The city could require you to return everything to its original condition, which would cost even more. And your insurance probably won't cover unauthorized renovations, Amanda added. Have you checked your policy? I hadn't, but a quick call to my insurance agent confirmed my fears. Damages resulting from unpermitted work by unlicensed contractors weren't covered. The financial reality was sinking in. Not only was my emergency fund gone, but fixing this mess would require taking on debt, something I'd avoided my entire adult life. That night, after Amanda and Mrs. Bradley left, I tried to sleep in my partially clean bedroom. Every creak and settle of the house made me wonder if more damage was occurring. Around 3 a.m., I gave up and started looking through what remained of my belongings. That's when I made another discovery. Personal items were missing. The silver frame holding my parents' wedding photo, my grandmother's antique brooch, several pieces of jewelry I'd inherited. Either Rachel had taken them for safekeeping during the renovation and forgotten to tell me, or I couldn't complete the thought. The idea that my sister might have sold or pawned my family heirlooms was too painful to consider. Yet as dawn broke and I sat surrounded by the chaos she'd created, I couldn't dismiss the possibility. The doorbell rang at 9 a.m. the next morning. I hadn't slept more than an hour and looked at unwashed hair pulled into a messy ponytail. Yesterday's clothes rumpled from my brief attempt at sleep. Through the peephole, I saw Rachel. She wasn't alone. Daniel Hughes, her supposedly ex-boyfriend, stood beside her. I hesitated before opening the door, but knew the confrontation was inevitable. "What do you want, Rachel?" I asked, not bothering with pleasantries. She pushed past me into the foyer, Daniel following with an apologetic smile. He was tall, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, exactly the stable, thoughtful type I'd always hoped Rachel would settle down with. "I came to smooth things over," Rachel announced, as if our disagreement had been a minor spat rather than her unauthorized demolition of my home. "And to introduce you properly to Daniel. He's agreed to help financially with completing the renovations." "Completing them?" I echoed in disbelief. "Rachel, there's an inspector coming this morning because none of this work was permitted." Daniel's expression shifted from apologetic to alarmed. "You didn't get permits?" he asked Rachel. "We were going to," she dismissed with a wave. "But that takes forever, and I wanted to surprise Morgan while she was in Chicago." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "Rachel, you told me Morgan had approved all of this before leaving town." The betrayal deepened. Not only had Rachel lied to me, but she'd also lied to Daniel to get his support. "This isn't what I wanted," I told them both, gesturing around us. I had my own renovation plans, carefully budgeted and researched. Rachel found my notebook and decided her vision was better. Rachel rolled her eyes. "Your plans were so boring. Beige walls and white cabinets? How uninspired can you get?" "It's my house," I shouted, my patience finally snapping completely. If I want beige walls and white cabinets, that's my choice. Not everyone needs to make a statement with turquoise bathroom tile and brass fixtures. "See, Daniel?" Rachel turned to him triumphantly. "This is exactly why I had to take over. My sister has no vision, no style. She would have turned this charming bungalow into a generic flip house." Daniel looked deeply uncomfortable. "Rachel, I think you're missing the point. You can't renovate someone else's home without their permission, regardless of your opinion of their taste." "Thank you," I said, grateful for his rational perspective. "Of course you'd take her side," Rachel snapped at him. "You always thought she was so perfect." The comment hung in the air, revealing an undercurrent I hadn't been aware of. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked. "Oh, please, don't act innocent. Daniel has always had a thing for successful, organized women like you. He spent our entire relationship trying to turn me into a mini Morgan." Daniel's face flushed. "That's completely unfair. I never compared you to your sister." "You didn't have to say it. It was obvious every time you lectured me about budgeting or career planning or finding direction." She made air quotes with her fingers. I was trying to process this new information when my phone chimed with a notification. Opening it, I found myself staring at Rachel's Instagram page. Amanda had sent the link with a message. "You need to see this." There were dozens of photos of my house, or rather, the renovation in progress. Rachel had been documenting everything under a new business profile called Reynolds Renovations. The caption under the most recent post read, "Transforming this boring bungalow into a stylish modern home. Can't wait to reveal the final product of my biggest design project yet." My hands shook with anger. "You've been using my home as a portfolio piece, presenting it as your project?" Rachel had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. "I was going to tag you in the final reveal. I thought you'd be excited about the exposure." "Exposure?" I nearly screamed the word. "You've exposed my private home to your followers, taking credit for a renovation I didn't approve, using money you stole from me." "I didn't steal anything. I borrowed it for improvements that will increase your property value." Daniel took the phone from my hand, scrolling through Rachel's posts with growing concern. "Rachel, some of these posts imply This is your house. She shrugged. Creative license. It sounds better than my sister's house that I'm helping renovate. Helping? I laughed bitterly. This isn't help, Rachel. This is invasion. This is violation. This is you, once again, thinking the rules don't apply to you. Her expression darkened. Oh, here we go. St. Morgan is going to lecture me about responsibility again. You know what? I'm sick of being compared to you. My entire life has been, why can't you be more like your sister? From everyone, mom, teachers, even boyfriends. She glared at Daniel. That's not my fault, I said quietly. I never asked to be your measuring stick. But you loved it, didn't you? She accused. Perfect Morgan, who handled everything when Dad left. Who got scholarships and promotions and bought a house while I was still trying to figure out what to do with my life. The argument was veering into territory we'd never fully explored, the resentment that had been building between us for years. I was 15 when our family fell apart, I reminded her. I didn't ask for the responsibility of practically raising you. I gave up my teenage years to make sure you could have yours, and you've never let me forget it. Every time you bail me out or let me crash at your place, it comes with this unspoken judgment about my life choices. Daniel attempted to mediate. Maybe this isn't the best time. Stay out of it, we both snapped simultaneously. Rachel continued. I wanted to do this renovation to show you I could contribute something valuable. That my design, sense, and creativity are worth something even if they don't come with a steady paycheck and benefits. By destroying my home without permission, by spending my money, that doesn't show value, Rachel. That shows complete disregard for boundaries. I just wanted you to be proud of me for once. Her voice cracked, revealing the vulnerability beneath her anger. In that moment, I saw clearly how our relationship had twisted into something unhealthy. My need to protect her had morphed into control. Her desire for approval had warped into rebellion. Rachel, I said more calmly, if you want me to be proud of you, start by respecting me. My home, my money, my choices. I do respect you, she insisted. I just think you're stuck in this boring, safe life, and I wanted to help you break free. That's not respect. That's you deciding you know better than I do what I want and need. Daniel cleared his throat. Morgan, for what it's worth, I had no idea this was done without your knowledge. I offered to help financially because Rachel told me you were stretched thin with the renovation costs. Another lie. The pattern was clear now. Rachel looked betrayed. So you're both against me now? Fine. I was only trying to help. This house had so much potential that you were wasting with your basic taste and boring plans. It's not your house, I finally shouted. It's not your money, and it's not your decision. The doorbell rang again. The city inspector had arrived. While I spoke with him in the foyer, Rachel stormed into the guest room where she'd been staying. The inspection went as poorly as expected. Multiple code violations were identified. Without proper permits, the electrical work was considered dangerous. The plumbing modifications would need to be completely redone by a licensed professional. I was looking at thousands in fines on top of repair costs. When the inspector left, I found Rachel in the guest room packing her things along with several items that weren't hers. My suspicions from the night before were confirmed when I spotted my grandmother's jewelry box in her bag. What are you doing with my grandmother's jewelry? I asked, my voice deadly quiet. Rachel flinched, caught red-handed. I was just keeping it safe during construction. There's so much dust everywhere. And my parents' wedding photo? The silver frame is worth a few $100s, isn't it? Her silence was damning. Get out, I said. Take your things, only your things, and get out of my house. We're done. Morgan, please, she began. But I cut her off. No. This isn't a temporary fight, Rachel. This is years of boundary violations culminating in the destruction of my home and theft of my possessions. I need you to leave and not come back. Daniel appeared in the doorway. I'll make sure she returns anything that isn't hers, he promised quietly. As they left, Rachel turned back with tears streaming down her face. You'll forgive me eventually. You always do. That's when I realized the unhealthiest pattern between us. Her certainty that no matter what she did, I would eventually forgive and continue enabling her. Not this time, I said, and closed the door. The next morning brought new complications. The city inspector had filed his report, and I received an official notice of violations. I had 30 days to either restore the house to its previous condition with proper permits or complete the renovations also with proper permits or face daily fines. My phone rang incessantly. First Robert Thompson, wanting updates on when I could return to work. Then my mother, Catherine Reynolds. Rachel called me sobbing. She began without preamble. She says you threw her out and accused her of stealing. Mom, she demolished my house without permission and took $12,000 from my accounts, I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. She was just trying to help, Morgan. You know how creative she is. And she said you'd discussed renovating anyway. The familiar pattern emerged. Mom making excuses for Rachel, minimizing her actions, expecting me to be the bigger person. Discussing future renovations is not the same as giving permission to tear down walls while I'm out of town, I said firmly. And what about the missing jewelry? Is that helping too? My mother hesitated. She said you gave her those pieces, that you weren't sentimental about them. The lie made me physically ill. My grandmother's jewelry was one of the few connections I had to her memory. That's completely false. Mom, you need to stop enabling her. This isn't a misunderstanding, it's destruction of property and theft. You're being dramatic. It's not like she burned the house down. From the photos she showed me, the renovations will look lovely when finished. Photos? What photos? On her Instagram. Reynolds Renovations? She's quite good, actually. Those blue accent walls will brighten the whole place up. I ended the call before saying something I'd regret. My mother had already chosen sides, as she often did, and I didn't have the emotional energy to fight both battles simultaneously. Work became another pressure point. I tried setting up my laptop in the bedroom, the only semi-functional space, but the constant noise from the house settling and occasional drips from compromised plumbing made concentration impossible. After several frustrated hours attempting to focus, I received a text from Robert. Need update on landing gear follow-up materials by EOD. I called Amanda in desperation. Can I work from your place this afternoon? I can't focus here, and I have a deadline. Better idea, she replied. I'm bringing my laptop to you. 2 heads are better than 1, and you shouldn't be alone in that construction zone. Amanda arrived an hour later with her computer and takeout. We worked side by side, finishing the landing gear materials just before the deadline. As we ate dinner surrounded by dust and construction debris, she asked the question I'd been avoiding. What's your plan, Morgan? Financially, I mean. I showed her the contractor quotes I'd been gathering. The lowest estimate to either restore or properly complete the renovations was $25,000, money I simply didn't have. Insurance is a no-go, I confirmed. I called 3 contractors about restoring the original layout, but they all said it would actually cost more than completing the open floor plan, since the support beams have already been modified. What about legal action against Rachel? Amanda suggested. Small claims court? Even if I won, she has no money to pay me back, and I can't afford an attorney for a larger lawsuit. The doorbell rang again. This time it was Stephanie Lewis, a colleague from work who had become a friend over the years. Robert mentioned you were dealing with home issues, she explained, looking around with wide eyes. I had no idea it was this bad. I gave her the abbreviated version as we cleared space to sit in the living room. This is eerily familiar, Stephanie said when I finished. My brother did almost exactly the same thing to me 4 years ago. Really? I leaned forward, desperate for someone who truly understood. She nodded. Decided my condo needed updating while I was on vacation. Used my emergency credit card to hire his buddy who claimed to be a contractor. Turned out neither of them knew what they were doing, and I ended up with $10,000 in damages. What did you do? I asked. I had to take out a home equity loan, she admitted. It was that or lose the condo entirely due to code violations. The silver lining was that once it was properly finished, my place appraised for 30% more than I'd paid. A home equity loan. The idea had occurred to me, but I'd been resistant. Taking on debt felt like failure after years of careful financial management. As if the universe wanted to pile on complications, my phone rang again. The caller ID showed a name I hadn't seen in months. Ethan Parker, my ex-boyfriend. Morgan? Amanda told me what happened. Are you okay? Ethan and I had dated for nearly 2 years before breaking up amicably when his job transferred him to Seattle. We'd remained loosely in touch, but I was surprised he'd called. Not really, I answered honestly. My house is in shambles. I'm facing potential fines, and my savings are gone, I heard. Listen, my dad's construction company might be able to help. They're based in Boston now, but they do jobs all over New England. Let me make some calls. After we hung up, another complication arose. My insurance company called. Not only would they not cover the current damages, but they were also threatening to cancel my policy entirely if the code violations weren't addressed promptly. A house without insurance would violate my mortgage terms, potentially triggering foreclosure. The pressure was building from all sides. Work deadlines loomed despite my crisis. Financial solutions all seemed to involve going into significant debt. Family support had evaporated with my mother taking Rachel's side. And every day, my once beloved home felt more like a burden than a sanctuary. That night, alone in my dust-covered bedroom, I allowed myself to consider the previously unthinkable, selling the house is at a loss, and walking away from everything I'd worked for. The thought brought both pain and strange relief. Maybe Rachel was right about one thing. Perhaps I had been playing it too safe, too controlled. But the right to make that choice had been taken from me, and the consequences were now mine alone to bear. The breaking point came 3 days after the inspection. I was sitting at my kitchen counter, the only surface not covered in construction dust, staring at spreadsheets of numbers that refused to add up to any solution that didn't involve significant debt. My phone rang. Mom again. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. Morgan, I'm outside your house. I opened the front door to find my mother standing on the porch, her expression shifting from determination to shock as she took in the actual state of my home. Oh my God, she whispered, stepping inside. Rachel showed me photos, but they were all close-ups of design elements. I had no idea. Her voice trailed off as she surveyed the half-demolished walls, exposed wiring, and general destruction. Welcome to my reality, I said, too exhausted for anger. Mom moved slowly through each room, her initial defense of Rachel crumbling with every new disaster she discovered. In the bathroom, she stopped at the pile of smashed blue tile. These are the same color as the ones in my childhood home, she said quietly. The home my father built. I know. That's why I kept them, even though I planned to replace them eventually. They reminded me of visiting Grandpa's house. She turned to me, tears in her eyes. Morgan, I'm so sorry. I had no idea it was this bad. Rachel made it sound like she was just helping redecorate. The validation I'd been seeking from her finally arrived, but it felt hollow amid the wreckage of my home. Still, it was a start. I need to fix this, I told her, gesturing around us. And I need to do it without enabling Rachel further. Mom nodded. Tell me what I can do to help. That simple offer, the first time in years my mother had asked how she could support me rather than asking me to support Rachel, marked a turning point. The next day, I called a meeting at Amanda's apartment. Around her dining table gathered an unlikely support team. Amanda, Stephanie, Ethan, who had flown in from Seattle, my mother, Mrs. Bradley, and surprisingly, Daniel. Rachel and I are officially done, he explained when I questioned his presence. After seeing how she manipulated both of us, I realized our relationship was built on lies. But I still want to help fix this situation. Together, we formulated a strategic plan. First, I needed financial breathing room. Mom stunned me by offering a loan from her retirement account. I enabled Rachel her entire life at your expense, she acknowledged. It's time I supported you for a change. I refused to take her retirement funds, but accepted her offer to stay with her temporarily while the house was made habitable again. This would save on short-term housing costs and give us time to rebuild our relationship. Ethan's father's construction company came through in an unexpected way. While they couldn't take on the full renovation, they sent their permit specialist to help navigate the city requirements and connected me with reliable subcontractors at discounted rates. Stephanie introduced me to her banker, who outlined home equity loan options that were less onerous than I'd feared. With my excellent credit score and the potential increased value of an open floor plan design, the numbers began making more sense. The reality is, the banker explained, sometimes good debt that builds equity, is a smart financial move. You've avoided all debt so far, which means your credit score is stellar. You've earned the right to leverage that advantage. Mrs. Bradley organized a neighborhood cleanup weekend. Everyone on the block has renovation horror stories, she assured me. They're happy to help another homeowner in distress. By week's end, I had a comprehensive plan. A modest home equity loan would cover completing the renovations properly with permitted work. A payment plan would handle the city fines. My house would be unlivable for 6 weeks, but the end result would potentially increase its value significantly. My boss, Robert, surprised me with his support when I finally explained the full situation. Family emergencies are family emergencies, he said simply. We'll work out a remote arrangement until your house is habitable again. The most difficult part was confronting Rachel. She had been calling and texting incessantly, alternating between tearful apologies and defensive justifications. Finally, I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop neutral territory. I've made a decision, I told her once we were seated. I'm going forward with renovations. Her face lit up. So you forgive me? You see that my design ideas were actually— No, I cut her off firmly. I'm completing the renovations because at this point, it's financially smarter than trying to restore everything. But I haven't forgiven you, and I won't until you take real responsibility for what you did. Her smile faltered. What does that mean exactly? It means acknowledging that you violated my boundaries, stole my money, and damaged my home, not because you wanted to help me, but because you wanted to prove something to yourself and others. She stared into her coffee. Mom said you're making her choose between us. That's not true. I've simply stopped accepting the dysfunctional family dynamic where I'm always expected to be the responsible one while you're allowed to cause chaos without consequences. For perhaps the first time in our adult lives, Rachel seemed to truly hear me. I really thought you'd love it once it was finished, she said quietly. I thought you'd be impressed with my design skills and grateful for the push to make your home less predictable. That's the problem, Rachel. You decided what I should want rather than respecting what I actually want. She nodded slowly. So what happens now? You pay me back, I stated simply. Not all at once, I know you can't. But we set up a payment plan, and you stick to it. You also publicly correct the impression you gave on social media that this was your project or your home. And then we're good? I shook my head. Then we start rebuilding trust. It will take time. To my surprise, she agreed to my terms without argument. Perhaps she finally recognized the severity of her actions, or maybe she simply realized I was no longer willing to enable her behavior. Either way, it felt like a step toward healthier relationship dynamics for both of us. The next weeks brought unexpected discoveries. As contractors properly opened walls and addressed structural issues, they uncovered beautiful, original features that had been hidden by previous renovations: ceiling beams in the living room, a brick chimney behind drywall, even hardwood floors under the bathroom's vinyl tile. I found myself enjoying the design decisions I now had the opportunity to make. The open floor plan that Rachel had forced upon me actually suited my entertaining style better than I'd admitted. I chose finishes that blended my preference for classic neutrals with selective pops of color that reflected my personality rather than current trends. Amanda pointed out the irony one evening as we reviewed tile samples. You know, in a twisted way, Rachel did force you out of your comfort zone. Don't you dare tell her that, I warned. But I was smiling. My mother and I spent weekends visiting salvage yards for authentic period pieces to incorporate into the design. During these outings, we had conversations we'd avoided for years about family dynamics, her enabling of Rachel, my tendency toward rigid control. Painful topics, but necessary ones. 6 weeks stretched to 8 as additional issues were discovered and addressed. Throughout the process, I found strength I didn't know I had, making decisions without second guessing, standing firm on quality when contractors suggested shortcuts, even negotiating better prices on materials. "You're a natural at this project management stuff," Stephanie observed when she visited the site. "Maybe there's a career shift in your future." I laughed off the suggestion, but the seed was planted. The marketing strategies I excelled at professionally were proving equally valuable in the renovation process. I began documenting the transformation not for social media validation like Rachel, but for my own satisfaction in seeing problems methodically solved. By the time the major work was completed, I had not only survived a crisis I'd thought might break me, but I'd emerged with new confidence, stronger boundaries, and a home that truly reflected both who I was and who I was becoming. 6 months after the day I returned early from my business trip to find my house being demolished, I stood in my newly renovated kitchen, arranging appetizers on the quartz waterfall island that had replaced my vintage countertops. The open floor plan allowed me to chat with Amanda and Stephanie in the living room while I prepared for my housewarming gathering. "I still can't believe how amazing this turned out," Amanda said, running her hand along the exposed brick chimney that now served as a focal point. "It feels like a completely different house, but somehow still feels like you." That was exactly the effect I'd aimed for. While the layout changes had been initiated without my consent, the finishing choices reflected a more confident version of my aesthetic. Warm, neutral walls provided a backdrop for colorful artwork I'd discovered at local galleries. The original hardwood floors had been restored to a natural finish that highlighted their character. Modern fixtures blended seamlessly with salvaged architectural elements. The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find my mother, arms full of flowers. "These are from your father," she said, surprising me. I told him about everything that happened, and he wanted to contribute something. My relationship with my father had been distant since the divorce, limited to holiday calls and occasional emails. This small gesture felt significant, another unexpected positive outcome from what had begun as disaster. As guests arrived, colleagues, neighbors, friends, I found myself enjoying the role of hostess in a way I hadn't before. The open layout made entertaining effortless, allowing conversations to flow between spaces. Mrs. Bradley brought her famous coconut cake, receiving compliments on her recipe as she proudly pointed out which neighbors had helped with which aspects of the renovation rescue. Ethan arrived with his new girlfriend, both of them genuinely impressed with the transformation. "My dad wants to know if you're interested in consulting on some of their renovation projects," he mentioned casually. "He says you have a knack for balancing modern updates with preserving character." The idea was intriguing. I'd discovered during this process that I enjoyed the creative problem-solving of renovation almost as much as my marketing work. Perhaps there was room in my life for both. Robert Thompson, my boss, cornered me by the new built-in bookshelves. "Morgan, I've been meaning to tell you the executive team was impressed with how you handled this personal crisis while still delivering on the landing gear account. We're announcing promotions next week, and I wanted you to hear it from me first. You're our new creative director." The promotion I'd been working toward for years achieved, not despite the renovation disaster, but partly because of how I'd navigated it. The irony wasn't lost on me. Near the end of the evening, the doorbell rang one final time. Rachel stood on the porch, looking nervous, a small gift bag in her hands. Our relationship had been cautiously rebuilding. She'd followed through on her commitment to repay me, sending monthly transfers without prompting. She'd also publicly corrected her social media posts, admitting the renovation had been initiated without permission and apologizing for misrepresenting her role. "I wasn't sure if I was invited," she said softly. "I wasn't sure if you'd come if I invited you," I replied honestly, then stepped back to let her in. She handed me the gift bag. "It's not much, but I wanted you to have it." Inside was a framed photo of us as children, sitting on the blue-tiled steps of our grandparents' porch. I remembered that day. I was about 10, Rachel 7. We were eating popsicles, Rachel's face sticky with red juice, both of us laughing at something forgotten. "I found it when I was going through Mom's photos," Rachel explained. "I thought it might be nice somewhere in your new space. A reminder of when things were simpler between us." I placed it on the mantel, next to the silver-framed photo of our parents' wedding that she had returned. It's perfect here. As Rachel mingled with the other guests, I observed how she carefully avoided taking credit for any part of the renovation, instead complimenting my choices genuinely. Small steps, but meaningful ones. By midnight, the last guests had left, and I found myself alone in my transformed home. What had begun as a violation had somehow evolved into an opportunity for growth, not just for the house, but for me. The rigid control I'd maintained over my environment had been forcibly disrupted, but in rebuilding, I'd discovered flexibility I didn't know I possessed. The financial precision I'd prided myself on had been shattered, yet I'd found peace with taking on strategic debt to create something of greater value. Most significantly, the family patterns I'd accepted as unchangeable had been broken and reformed into healthier dynamics. My mother was stepping up rather than enabling. Rachel was facing consequences rather than escaping them. And I was setting boundaries instead of walls. I ran my hand along the edge of the island, feeling the cool stone beneath my fingertips. This house was finally, truly mine. Not because I'd controlled every aspect of its creation, but because I'd fought for it, adapted for it, and ultimately transformed alongside it. Looking around at the space that now reflected both who I was and who I was becoming, I realized the unexpected gift hidden within the chaos. Sometimes our walls need to come down before we can build something stronger. If you've ever had to rebuild something in your life, whether a physical space or a relationship, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Did it turn out better than you expected? Were there silver linings you discovered along the way? Don't forget to like and subscribe if this resonated with you, and share with someone who might need encouragement in their own rebuilding process. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, sometimes the most beautiful transformations begin with unexpected demolition.